Alright, so today we're going to go over Substance Painter and how to get into that, start using it. It's a really neat program. It's like Photoshop painting in 3D using your model, and it lets you paint on UVs on one and directly on the model in the other window. I'll show you how to get started in there. So first thing, you open up Substance Painter. There's some configuration stuff you have to do. There's a lot of documentation online for getting it set up correctly, so just follow through on that with setting up your DDR delay and some other things that might cause issues. But again, email me if you have problems with that, or just again, there's a lot of good documentation, so it shouldn't be too hard to figure out the necessary setup. Anyway, so start with a new project, template, metallic roughness, correct, file, and this is where you're going to select your mesh. So I'm going to work with the crate again. So let's go. Alright, so yeah, I'm going to work with my final crate. Document resolution, I'm going to start with 1024 just for performance issues, performance reasons. You can change the resolution you're working at dynamically after you've already started your project, which is one of the really cool things about Painter. But just for getting a hang of it, I'll start with that 1024. Normal map format, if you've baked in Marmoset, you're going to want to switch to OpenGL. OpenGL is also the normal map format for engines like Unity and I believe Unreal Engine, so it's generally a safer option. But the algorithmic programs like Substance Designer and Substance Painter default to DirectX, so just know that if you don't configure that, your normals aren't going to display properly. And then here I'm going to add all the materials I've baked. So I'm just going to select everything and import them, and they'll show up down here and for me to use later. And press OK. That should start the project. Yeah. So what we have here, we have the 3D model over here, and the UVs displayed lit over here, which is really cool. So for some configuration stuff, I'm gonna use those bakes I made as a basis for what I'm gonna paint. So under texture set, sorry, let's make sure. Oh yeah, so under texture set settings, there's all these options for mesh maps. So these are the stuff I've already baked and I've already set up for the mesh. So start with my normal map, and if you type in project, it's gonna sort things by stuff that you've imported into the project and filter out anything that's default in Substance Painter. So right away I can select my normal map, and instantly it's applied, and my crate starts to look more like what I'm going for. And then I'm just going to go down the line here and do the same for all of these. I'm going to need my world space normal, my ID map, my ambient occlusion. For this one I'm going to use the high poly ambient occlusion because they haven't been combined yet. Curvature, position, thickness is something that's really useful for subsurface scattering and translucency. So if you have, if you're working, it's more useful for things like skin and glass than it is for hard surface that we're doing right now. So don't worry about that one. But that's something that's worth looking into if you're interested in painting and sculpting human faces, human bodies. Okay, so we have these base textures set up. Up here, I'm gonna edit my channels a little bit. I'm not working with a height map, so I'm just gonna delete that one. So I'm just working with my color, roughness, metallic, and normal. Normal mixing is fine. Left it combine, ambient occlusion, UV padding. It's all good there. If you don't have these mesh maps baked in Marmoset, and you haven't purchased Marmoset, you can also bake within Substance Painter, which is really cool. If you open up the mesh bake maps here and load up your high poly in here, you can then choose to bake all of these within Substance Painter, which is an option if you haven't bought Marmoset. Feel free to figure out how to use Substance Painter. The downside of Painter is that you don't get the cage is not visualized, so you have to through trial and error, figure out how far away you need to make the cage from the model in order to get your bakes right. So, which is why I tend to use marmoset. Okay, so let's start off with some base colors. So right off the bat, you start with a clean layer. That's as you can see by the checkers, it's transparent, and this works almost exactly like Photoshop, except that you have layer types. So with this transparent layer and with this stacked one, these are painting layers that you can draw on. You can just start drawing. You can draw on either of these spaces, which is really cool. The thing to think about with which one you're choosing to draw on is whether or not the detail you're adding is contextual to UV seams. Because if you start painting over here, when you get to the edge of the UV seam, it doesn't continue off the edge, so you'll get let's see where that ended up. So you get stuff like this where you'll it does its best to continue off the edge and bleed a little bit, but you'll need to figure out after the fact how to continue on over here. Yeah, this would be a continuation of that. And you can see it start to appear over here. But that's Photoshop. That's essentially what you're doing when you're painting textures in Photoshop. You're trying to figure out where the UVs line up and all that nonsense. Whereas we're using Painter because we don't have to worry about that, and we can just draw directly across UV seams without worrying about where stuff is packed on the MRAP. I'm just going to delete that one because we don't need that. Okay, the other really useful layer style is this paint bucket, which is just a solid color. That's what I find is the best way to start when I'm working in Substance Painter, is just with a color on the bottom. And then the next part is once you have a layer, you can add a mask to it. This is where the material material ID mask comes in that you baked in Marmoset or baked in Substance Painter. And if you bring in an object that already has multiple materials on it that you assigned in Maya, it'll recognize right off the bat that those can be selected as separate materials. But I have a material ID mask, so I'm going to start with an add mask with color selection. And color select from the material ID mask. And pick color. And when I hit pick color, it's going to assign the material ID mask as the color map on the object, so I can see exactly which color I'm picking right now. So I'm going to start with the red, and it's going to create a mask of that only assigns to the crate proper, and not the eagle, which is separate on the material ID mask. So I'm going to go back to the main properties of this one, and this is where I'm going to set up essentially what this crate is going to look like at a clean slate, without anything, without any grime on it, any modifiers, just the basic color. So base color down here. This is a fill layer, so it's going to fill the entire space of that this layer is applied to based on the mask. So I'm going to make a middle green. I'm going to assign a roughness value that affects just that crate. I'm going to make it fairly rough. That's fine. It is not metallic, so I can leave that all the way black. And it does not have any additional normals, though within Substance Painter there's a lot of built-in noises that you can assign that apply only to the normal map. So yeah, those are pretty cool. And you can import anything into Substance Painter as additional. Let's sort of these then. Procedural, normal. There's not a really good selection of normals built into a designer or a painter, but so for the most part, I'm going to leave the normal as the default. Then I'm going to make another fill layer for the eagle, and it's going to override the last one, so I need to add a mask. Color selection, pick color, blue. And now it only applies to the eagle. And make this one the gold of last time. Make it a rich yellow orange. So it's going to be shinier, so it's going to be on the darker side of the roughness spectrum. And it's going to be full white metallic with no extra normals. So now we have something to start with. Something to notice is that there are weird seams in where the materials meet. And that's because if you look back at the material ID mask, there's gaps in between materials where it's trying to blend between blue and red. And what I can do to alleviate that is actually just remove the mask on this guy. Remove mask so that the entire crate is then green, including the eagle. And then this next one, instead of being applied just to the blank eagle, is applied on top of the base color of green, so that you don't get any seams in between the material breaks. This is generally a good idea. Your lowest color should not have a mask on it, so that something is always a proper color. Okay, so now we can get into painting. So I'm gonna start with the curvature map. Again, I'm gonna make a fill layer, and this time, instead of using a base color, I'm gonna click on instead of clicking on the color to choose a color, I'm gonna click on base color to choose a resource. I'm gonna type in project because that'll bring up the tag of things that I've imported directly into the project. And here I am at curvature. So the curvature is now applied as its own layer. And over here we have normal blend mode. We have blend modes, which work exactly like Photoshop. Oh wow, they actually, yeah. So they've added a lot since I last used this, but it looks like there's almost as many blend mode options as there are natively in Photoshop. So I'm just going to select overlay, and I'm going to get those crisp edge highlights that I like so much. And do the same thing that I did last time with the ambient occlusion. So another fill layer, base color, AO, blend mode, multiply. And look at that. So we're starting to get stuff. And just like Photoshop, you have opacity, so you can control that with these sliders down here. So turn that down a little bit. And now we can start painting. So I'm gonna add a layer. So a normal layer, not a fill layer. And I want this only to affect the crate, so I'm gonna add that mask. So mask with color selection, pick color, red. So now I can paint anything on this, and it'll only affect the crate. And with grime, what I'm well with anything really, you have a brush to work with, and the brush has a lot of configuration options. So up here is your size, flow, and opacity, and that controls how the paint comes out. So yeah, you can modify that as you need to. Angle is more important when you have an alpha on, so I'm going to go take a look at that. Alpha is really cool. So this is where you get to decide how what shape the paint comes out in. So this is where you can import logos, you can import all kinds of fun stuff. And let's see. But I want dirt, so I'm going to scroll through the existing substance painting options and find something that I think represents the kind of grime I'm looking for. So like dirt blurry. I'm going to turn up the size, turn down the flow, turn down the opacity, turn up the spacing. Yeah, I'll leave the spacing. Yeah, that looks like kind of some grime that I'm looking for. So you can play with all kinds of alphas. You can import as many alphas as you like, going back up to import resources. You can add anything. So if I let's see, say I wanted to just paint with this dirt. And I would decide that it is a texture, an alpha. Oh yeah, okay, sorry. So if I were to grayscale, use it as an alpha, use this one as a texture. Import them to project. Now these are available for me to choose as alphas. Alpha, project. And now I'm painting in that shape with that thing as the grayscale option. With black being no paint, white being yes paint. And that's just some cool stuff. But yeah, you can import all kinds of stuff as your alpha. So now we get down here to the properties of what you're painting with. So this is really important because when you're painting in substance painting, unlike in Photoshop, you're affecting all 4 maps at once. So this drop down up here. So what this does is it allows you to choose between which style of layer is visualized. By default, it's going to show up as base color, and that's usually fine to leave it as, unless you want something that only affects a certain map. So if I only want to paint on the normal map, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to turn down the opacity entirely. But as you notice, when I switch to roughness, the opacity is turned all the way up again. So I'm going to turn it down all the way on that one. Metallic, I'm also going to turn it all the way down, so that the only one that's fully opaque is on the normal map. I'm going to switch the blend mode to normal, and I'm going to go over this level space just to show you what that looks like. So I'm gonna find one of the default materials to paint with, because so what it's doing is I'm not actually able to edit the base normal map, because that's above the project and under my texture set. So anything in these layers is not going to affect the base normal map, because that will always exist. We got materials. Let's find something that has an interesting normal. Okay, so this fabric. I'm gonna use this fabric, and it's going to give me some flavor. Paint on here. Okay, yeah. So you can start to see how it's affecting. Let's turn up the normal strength. Alright, so it's harder to visualize when it's just a normal map, but once I go back to material, you see that there is now normal detail on my model without that affecting anything like anything in the color map, anything in the roughness. It's just the model. Now now I'm going to move to the roughness side. I'm going to add another new layer. I'm going to turn it off in color and leave it on in everything else. Paint. And now that affects the roughness. I'm stealing the roughness of that material. I'm stealing the normal of that material and metallic. So it's only so it's not affecting the color at all. So it's inheriting whatever color I've already added to the project. So that's just something to think about when you're painting in Substance Painter. You are affecting all 4 maps at once, instead of just working on the color, just working on the normal, just working on the malice at a given time. Anyway, back to the grime. So I'm gonna turn off the material now. I'm just gonna remove the material, so it's back to just this white. So I can configure and make my own custom setup. So I want some brown dirt. Find a good brown. Roughness. Dirt is much rougher than the underlying plastic. Dirt is not metal, and right now the dirt doesn't have normal, but that's okay. So start painting, and you can see it's affecting the roughness, it's affecting the metallic. If I were to paint this on the eagle, right now there's a mask, so let's remove the mask for now just to show you what that looks like. So it's turning off the metalness on the eagle because it's overriding it, and it's also affecting the roughness. So yeah, that's a cool part about painting, is that you are affecting all maps at once. So when you export this, it's going to give you a map that is perfectly configured to display anything you paint, as long as your layers are configured correctly. So paint the dirt. Again, not even worrying about UV seams, they're already configured. The painter really doesn't worry about them. Painter does worry about UV stretching, so make sure if you start to paint and you see like pixels going all over the place and other weird stuff, it's probably because your UVs aren't unwrapped properly. You need to go back and configure that. What doesn't matter is placement. What does matter is that you need straight lines, and you need stuff not being skewed. What really helps when you're in Maya or 3ds Max or wherever you're unwrapping is to apply a checkerboard pattern and make sure that the checkers are all about the same size and aren't warped in any meaningful way. So then that'll give you a good idea of like how pixels will be displayed on your object at final render. Okay, that's very cool. Okay, so we also have these smart materials that are already built into Painter that are really fun to use. I showed you a bit with that fabric before, but say I wanted to just paint pure gold on my object. I could try to just paint it on, but a better option is to use fill layers. So this is again what your material ID map is for. So I'm going to turn that eagle into a more say brass or aluminum. So I'm going to use mask with color selection, pick color, pick the eagle, go back to this, and instead of configuring these guys, I'm going to select a material. Right off the bat, I can select this aluminum and play with the attributes. Now, something else you can import, and which is really cool with Substance Designer, is you can import materials you've created. As if you save out an SBSAR file from Substance Designer, if you've created material outputs, like if you've made your own custom metal, if you made your own custom plaster, you can export that, and back under Import Resources, you can import that SBSAR, and the smart materials will show up down here. You've already made tiling materials. So I like that guy, so I'm going to control the, play with the controls a little bit. Pattern. So, oh yeah, so tiling is available through smart materials. I'm going to turn that up so it tiles more. Folds, play with the normals, grid. But yeah, you can do this with literally any of the existing materials. So if you're having trouble figuring out material configuration, feel free to just start with a base of any one of these smart materials. So I like this eagle being this pure brass. And if you notice, it's not doing anything more complicated than just setting this up as like the scientific people setting up Substance Designer and Substance Painter know, is this is a mathematical representation of what pure brass is in roughness. And it is purely metallic, it is 0.2 roughness, and this is the natural color of brass. So if you don't have reference rate on hand, if you don't have like a piece of brass to look at, or if you don't have carbon fiber, let's add that to the crate. So new fill layer, color selection mask, pick color, red, and let's make this one carbon fiber for fun. Now the crate's made out of carbon fiber. It's got normals built into it, because I don't know what the normals for carbon fiber look like right off the top of my head. I don't know the exact color or the roughness, but somebody's already done that for me. And that's one of the big secrets of 3D modeling, and well, really anything digital art related, is that somebody's probably already done what you're thinking of doing. And that was the biggest lesson I learned when I was learning stuff, is that if I had a question and if I really wanted to do something with my art project, I could figure that somebody smarter than me had already thought of trying to do that. And all I needed then was just to know what to look for and know what kind of like Google search terms I needed. And from there, I could learn to do almost anything I wanted to, or learn how to get help, proper help on it. So that's kind of the timeline. Yeah. Oh, that's good fun. Doing that. So from here, you might find that your material map or your material ID map isn't quite adequate for where you want everything to be. Like I want this gold to be somewhere else. Well, the cool thing, unlike Photoshop, is that you can add more than one mask to each layer. So I already have the material ID map set up on this brass to be only on the eagle, and that's with an uneditable material ID mask, so I can't go back and edit directly. But I can add another mask, and that is a black mask. So with the black mask, it's going to override it as, oops, let's see. Yeah. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, well, maybe you can't do multiple masks, but the point, more of the point is, instead of a color selection mask, you can duplicate this layer. Duplicate this layer, and instead of using the color selection mask, I'm going to move that mask, add a black mask. And now, now instead of painting on the actual layer, I'm going to just paint on the mask. This is a lot like Photoshop, where I'm just going to paint directly on here, and it's going to replace anything underneath it with this brass material. And so I'm not painting the brass because the brass is a fill layer and it's filling the entire thing. But the black mask means that anywhere I add white to the mask, it will add this pure brass material underneath. And this is really useful if you want to do like rust, if you want to do any like chipping, if you want to expose metal underneath. The problem here is that now I have this carbon fiber normal on top of the brass, which I don't want. I want to say that the carbon fiber was chipped away and underneath there was brass, which makes no sense, but we're going to run with it. So we're going to go back up to these layer selections, and I'm going to go to my normals because that's where the problem is. And by default, all new layers are set to normal multiply, or normal combine. Which one is it? Okay, normal map detail, which means that it's going to try to combine all the normal maps. So it'll overlay them on top of each other. So right now I'm getting the brass normals and the carbon fiber normals. So I'm going to switch that from normal map detail to just normal. And that didn't work. Oh, right. Okay. So by default, this brass doesn't have a normal map. So if I turn on the normal map parameter, that's the other thing. With each material you're painting with, you can choose which layers it affects here. So if I want to paint with the, if I want the brass to only affect the color map, I can turn off all of these, and the only thing that'll go through is the color that it's adding to the layers below it. So if I turn these back on, it'll now override everything because it's set to normal blend on the normal map instead of normal combine. Let's find some other fun materials to play with. I'm gonna change this off of carbon fiber though, because it's kind of annoying. It's not fun to visualize. It's fine. Material. So that's some plastic. Yeah. So it's got that nice plastic sheen, slight roughness. It's not metallic, and it's blue. And I'm going to turn on normal so it has a base normal to it. All right. So plastic chipped away to expose this brass. Well, let's say that brass doesn't quite do what I want because it's got this like fuzzy edge. This is where you can go back to the alpha of your dirt or chipping or whatever. And again, I'll choose this dirt alpha. And let's just use that instead. And start to get more of what you're looking for. And you can again just use any kind of alpha. This one's still got some fuzzy edges, so you turn up the hardness, and that helps. But I'm also at a fairly low resolution, so I can change that here. I know I baked at 2048, so I can turn that up, and you start to see that the alphas get more detailed. So again, I can change that at any point. I can go back and decide what resolution I'd rather be working at. But for some lower performance computers, it's easier to be working at lower resolutions like 512 or 1024, and then at the very end switch it to a higher resolution and export it that. Because what Painter's doing is it's not storing paint, it's storing paint strokes. So it knows that, and this is why it's a heavy program and why the files tend to be really big, is that it's saving your clicks, it's saving your strokes, and it's saving which alpha you were using at the time you made the stroke. So anytime you up-res, it's going to go back and reprocess the entire thing and replace your strokes with higher resolution alpha, which is really cool and really helpful. But it's also something to keep in mind for performance and file size reasons. So yeah, I generally recommend working at a lower resolution. 1024 is usually good until you get down to the nitty-gritty of really personalized paint strokes or grime additions that you want to make sure are absolutely correct. Yeah. So I'm not much of a painter myself, but there are a lot of options for stylized texture painting within this program, which is really nice. So I'm going to go back and re-add that curvature map. I find that's generally a good starting point for edge painting. Go back to overlay. And I'm going to go here. I'm going to find what's fun is that people have already thought about like what a brush stroke looks like. So much like the Photoshop default brushes, you can have like fun brush stroke shapes within Painter. Make sure you have your spacing turned down so that you're getting more precise brush strokes, and you can start to make it look like you're actually like in Photoshop using a paintbrush, but instead of painting just a color, you're painting an entire material, you're painting the mask. And that can be a lot more interesting. But again, you can go back down and decide that I only want to influence the paint. I want to paint some fun edge highlights, so I'm going to turn off roughness, metalness. I'm only going to affect the color. Color pick, hold down color pick for some reason. Choose that edge color. Go up. I'm going to turn down my brush size. I'm just going to noodle away at this for a little while because that's the fun of it, and that's why where you get out of the procedural baking materials, and you can go back to like you're just painting on a model. It's like you have the little model in your hand. You've made this 3D model, you've sculpted it, you baked it. Now you can say like, I just want to paint on it, and you don't have to worry about all the procedure of going through Photoshop and going through all these multiple layers and all that nonsense, and you can just spend a good amount of time refining your model here. I would recommend this even if you're doing photoreal stuff, because with photoreal materials, you're going to lose a lot of the you're going to lose a lot of the personality if you're just working with procedural textures, and if you're just working with your bakes or just working with whatever default generator. It's easy and it's fast, but at the end of the day, when you're working in your portfolio, you're going to want to see that personality and that personal touch that you've added to things, whether that comes in the form of like sculpting in ZBrush. Me not being a painter, that's generally what I gravitate towards, is doing these detailed bakes beforehand of going in and like last week's video, taking the model into ZBrush, beating it up, and adding some really specific detail that like someone will look at that model and say, yeah, that wasn't baked, or that wasn't decided by a procedural generator. That was done by hand. And this guy knows what he's doing. This guy knows how he's looked at things in the real world and decided how he wants his dirt to sit. And that sounds kind of silly, but it shows care and it shows an attention to detail that if you want to get into video games, that's what people are looking for. Because like the player is not going to necessarily notice that or think about noticing it, but they're going to notice when it's not there. You're going to notice when something looks quickly done or procedurally done. You're going to say, like, oh, that looks like someone threw a dirty filter on a top-down picture that they downloaded from a stock photo. And then they're going to say it's a cool looking game. They're not going to say, wow, that's a really well done hand painted texture. They're going to say that's a cool looking game, and they're going to move on, and they're going to have fun, and they're not going to harp on about like how your textures look shitty, because that's the goal at the end of the day, is to not be noticed and just be lumped in as, wow, that's a good product. And any questions? Cool. Okay, so a quick demo on adding decals and stickers to your objects. So I'm going to start with this thing I found on Google, and we're going to turn this into a decal that can be moved and placed in Substance Painter. So this is Photoshop. I'm just going to save this as a 512 by 512 square image. Sticker PNG. But I do need another image for this, which is my mask. So I'm going to select everything that's not directly the sticker. So that'll do. Maybe just a little bit more. Expand by 5 pixels. Okay, so that's about right. And then instead of using the sticker, I'm going to make a new layer, mask it, and make the outside black. So now this will be my alpha for placing the sticker, so that only anything that's white will be placed. So that's one put it. Sticker mask, also PNG. Okay, and back to the Substance Painter. File, import resources, add resources. 2 stickers. I'm going to set the mask as an alpha file and the sticker as a texture file. Import my resources to the current project, and there they are. Okay, so now I'm going to make a new layer, a painting layer, and I'm going to set up my my alpha to be correct. So by default, you'll have an alpha on your brush. Usually it's that little circle that looks like you're painting. So what I'm going to do instead is, by default it'll look something like this, with low opacity, turned up opacity, different flow and spacing, so that normally I'm painting like this, but instead I want to be able to just place an image. The important thing here is that I'm going to stop using a tablet and I'm going to go to a mouse, because tablets have pressure sensitivity, and pressure sensitivity affects jitter, which is the size of the stroke being placed. So if I place a small one, if I press softly, it's gonna place a different size than if I press a bit harder. So I'm going to stop using a tablet, switch to a mouse. I'm going to turn the size up. I'm going to turn the flow all the way up, stroke capacity all the way up, because I want this to be placed 100% over whatever's underneath it, and spacing all the way up. So I'm only, even if I drag it, I'm only placing one at a time. Angle is very important here, because the angle you can change the direction that things are placed, and that'll be really useful in a second. But now down to alpha. So with alpha, I'm going to go to project, and sticker mask, which is marked as no. So now with just paint, I'm placing the sticker. Note that this is where angle becomes a bit more relevant, because now I can place the sticker at an angle. And then go down to here. Instead of placing a color, I'm going to place that sticker. I'm going to place that sticker. And boom, look at that. Now I'm placing it wherever I want on my UV. Over here, if I place it like that, right now I have UV alignment turned on, which makes it so that the rotation is aligned as if the brush was hovering over the UVs. So top to bottom is considered this way, left to right's that way. If I change it to tangent wrap, which is default, it's based on the camera, or where the camera's looking. So if you have it like that, and you've established your angle, and you know what kind of rotation you want, you can come over here and change that, place it a bit differently. And yeah, and you can change the settings too. So if I want that sticker to be really shiny, I can turn the roughness all the way down. And click. And go back to material mode. So now the sticker is more reflective than what's underneath it. If I turn the roughness all the way up, same thing. The sticker should be more rough than what's underneath it. Metallic sticker. Should be doing it. Yep. Cool. Yeah, so I would recommend sticking with placing stickers and decals in the UV side of things, because you get a lot more control over angle and a lot more consistency, and you don't have to worry about aligning your camera properly. If you set up your UVs properly, you shouldn't have many seams in obtrusive places. But if you're finding that there's a seam directly over like a curve that you want to align with, just line up your camera. Don't move the camera. Set your alignment to tangent wrap, and just tweak the angle until you have one you like. And boom. And no matter what, especially with hard edges, you're going to get some stretching. So just Control Z is your friend. Control Z, do it again. Control Z, do it again. Until you find one you like.